Hello, everyone, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the Better the Pond Pondcast, the Flying V edition, where we talk to incredible people who are creating impact and ripples on the pond. My name is Warren Berry, and I'm your host. I'm the founder of Instinctive Solutions, where we believe that everyone is not duck, but that is what makes them awesome. Today, my guest is Arthur Kwann. Arthur is the CEO of the Newly Institute, based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. The Newly Institute is a treatment facility that deals with trauma, addiction, and mental health issues. With over an 80% success rate, the Newly Institute is absolutely top of its class. Arthur started his career in the financial industry and found his way into Newly. Arthur and his team were creating some incredible ripples by helping people like police officers, paramedics, and other first responders. They help the people who help us. In turn, those who reverse the effects of trauma can be there for their family and friends. Thank you, Arthur, for everything that you do in creating a company that truly betters the pond. Arthur Kwann, CEO, co-founder of the Newly Institute, based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. I really want to thank you so much for taking the time out of your crazy hectic schedule to be a guest on the Better the Pond podcast. It's great to have you, Arthur.
Thanks, Warren. It's great to be here, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. So everyone knows this is your very first podcast. So this is going to be like absolute rock star quality. I can tell already.
It is. I'm a little nervous, but also a little excited. I've been keeping a pretty low profile on social media, as we were talking about before, but I'm excited to be on here.
Nervous excitement. It's a great place to be. So we had met, so I'll give a shout out to Tech Canada. So we met at your Tech Canada meeting when I was a speaker there. And, number one, of course, you won the grand prize of being a guest on the podcast, but also, as I said to you earlier, and when I talked a little bit about it when we were in the session, is just, the work that you're doing in regards to, mental health and addiction and pain, and we'll get into those kind of things, I think is a really important message, a really important narrative to get out. So again, I want to thank you for being here, because then, you can share the story of the Newly and what you're doing so that, other people can be educated.
No, my pleasure. Yeah, and it's a relatively new venture for me, and I can tell you a little bit about my background. But the Newly Institute was formed about 3 years ago, and it's hard to believe that 3 years ago it was a business plan on paper, and fast forward to today, we have 3 clinics open. Our flagship clinic is in Calgary. Our second clinic we opened was in Fredericton, New Brunswick, and our third, most recent clinic is in Edmonton. And I have some exciting news to share with you, Warren. We recently got awarded a PTSD contract from WorkSafe BC. And to that end, we're actually in the process of opening up our 4th clinic in Kelowna. In fact, I just signed the lease a couple weeks ago. So we're hoping to open up our 4th clinic in Kelowna by end of the year or early in the new year. But the Newly Institute, we bill ourselves as an interdisciplinary mental health clinical company. So what does that mean? So by interdisciplinary, in our clinics, we have psychiatrists, psychologists, occupational therapists, nurses trained in addiction and pain, as well as social workers. And we offer these, we call them IOPs, so intensive outpatient programs. And they're holistic in nature. And so you can't come to us and book a one-off session. It's a program, and it's typically 4 to 8 weeks in length. And we have different verticals that I can get into a little bit later. But these programs are intensive. A client of ours may be in our clinic, 3, 4, 5 times a week for several hours at a time.
Wow.
And typically each one of our programs involves over 100 hours of psychotherapy. But in addition to that, Warren, we also have group therapy, trauma-informed yoga, art therapy, drumming, etc. And I mentioned our program. So we have different verticals. Uh, I like to say, so we have a return to work program. We do a lot of work with the workers' compensation boards across Canada. We have a chronic pain management program, an addiction treatment program, and finally a psychedelic assisted psychotherapy program for treatment-resistant depression, anxiety, and trauma, including PTSD. And so our psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses are all very specialized in the sense that they're trained in addiction or pain management, but on top of that, they've taken advanced courses in different modalities of psychotherapy, such as accelerated resolution therapy or EMDR, eye movement desensitizing and reprocessing therapy, or cognitive behavioral therapy, that sort of thing. So yeah, my partners are doctors, and and it's been exciting. We focus on, although we do see the general public, Warren, we
Mhm.
have a particular focus on first responders and veterans. So, for
Mm.
example, our contract with the Workers' Compensation Board of Alberta is a first responder contract, and it's a TPI contract, so traumatic psychological injury contract. So if you lose a limb on the job, that's not us. But if you suffer and can't go to work because of um, addiction or chronic depression or anxiety, then that's us.
Mm. Wow. I'm really glad that you say that, you got involved with first responders, because I mean, the things that they see and the things that they have to deal with are incredible. And it's really nice to know that, they have a place to go to be able to work through that, because I mean, yeah, they're first responders, but they're still human beings. And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's I can't even, fathom some of the stuff they see as being the first sort of professional on the scene of accidents, homicides, that sort of thing. So we do a lot of work here in Calgary with the Calgary Police Service, the correctional officers, for example, firefighters, etc. And yeah, and one of the things that we value also is privacy and discretion.
Mhm.
But having said that, one of our very first clients is actually an actively serving police officer. He was so happy with our program that he decided to go public, and we got some press out of Global News and some other media outlets. And in his words, we transformed his life. He and that's why we're here. We're here to make a difference for and sort of give back to society and help those that help us.
You better the pond.
Yeah, exactly. I
You
guess
better the
we were
pond.
gonna
There it
get
is.
there.
This is
Yeah.
perfect.
No, and that's a big part, we've talked about a pro bono program as well, Warren, where for those we have a pro bono program where someone can't afford our therapy. We offer them, I think it's 5% of our client intake are on a pro bono basis.
Oh,
Uh,
nice.
and yeah, and so that's our way of I guess bettering the pond in your terminology.
Sure. Yeah, that's fantastic. So yeah, you're providing a service that people otherwise may not be able to have it. So that's really, over and above, which is very, very impressive, Arthur. A couple of questions for you before we move
Sure.
on is, if you look at sort of the general sphere of the clientele that you see, what would be the number one concern? What would be the number one problem, I guess, that you would see with people that come into your doors?
I would say it's most likely trauma and addiction. There's a lot of comorbidity in the sense that a lot of these ailments are interlinked in the sense that, we look at, for example, the opioid crisis, often leads to, it stems from chronic pain to opioid addiction, and then trying to wean off that addiction. And trauma is often tied to, anxiety or depression. It's very interlinked, and that's why our programs, and we're in the process. We're actually working with the University of Alberta psychiatric department to publish a paper about the outcomes of our patients. So
Mm.
we're hoping to have that out here early in the new year. But and that's why we put together these medical protocols and holistic programs where we can get into the root of the problem, as opposed to trying to suppress them with drugs or or other sort of bandages.
Yeah, excellent, fantastic. I just finished reading Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal. So I just finished reading that. I've read all his books, and probably one of the most published authors on the planet when it comes to trauma and addiction, and really amazing work. And the comorbidity between the two is quite fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're big fans of Gabor. We actually co-hosted a conference with him a couple of years ago on the addiction side. Our chief medical officer is Dr. Robert Tanguay, and he's a well-known psychiatrist here in Canada, because I think he's one of a handful of psychiatrists that have done not one but two fellowships. So he
Oh, wow.
did a fellowship in addiction treatment and also pain management. And so he's often on the conference circuit. And I remember Rob and Gabor co-hosting a conference a couple years ago. And we do what we can too. There was an addiction conference here last year in Calgary that we sponsored and set up a booth. But that's yeah, and if you follow us on social media, you can see that we have a very active social media program. We're trying to get the word out and yeah, have more people aware of our programs and services too. I think our extension into BC will be quite impactful, as there is a long waiting list to existing clinics in BC, and we're trying to offset some of those long waits. And another example is here in Calgary. The wait times for some of the other mental health clinics here in town can be upwards of 7 to 8 months, which is a long time if you're suffering from depression or trauma. That's a long wait.
Yeah, absolutely. And in that time, I mean, the story just keeps getting retold and gets right. The more you start to believe something, the truer it gets, right? So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
How has it been? Now, one thing that really interested me, we talked a little bit about this when we were in your tech session too, just I think it was on the break, but as using of psychedelics, so things like psilocybin and those kind of things for
Yeah.
and how
Yeah, and that's an emerging trend here. So we do use some psychedelics in our therapy, but by and far we're mostly a mental health company. So, for example, our return to work program with WCB Alberta doesn't involve any psychedelics at all.
Mhm.
However, having said that, we do use some psychedelics in our therapy with clients of WorkSafe New Brunswick, for example. So it's really it's an emerging, I guess, therapy, and we're just at the forefront with it.
Mm.
And it's there's been phenomenal results. We primarily use ketamine
Okay.
in our psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. And ketamine, as you probably know, is widely available and legal here in Canada. It's being used in hospitals, veterinary clinics, and other clinics as an anesthetic or tranquilizer. And so we microdose ketamine in our psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. Um, Now, in addition, we have also implemented psilocybin in some of our therapy. And so psilocybin is a restricted access drug. So we have to apply to Health Canada on a case-by-case basis under
Mm,
their special access program in order to use psilocybin. But we have used it in several of our treatments, and it's mostly related to patients that are in palliative care, sort of end of life sort of situations, and it's used to help deal with end of life anxiety, if
mm,
you will.
okay.
Um, now, ketamine is there's lots of research on ketamine. In fact, one member of our medical advisory board, Dr. Jennifer Swainson, out of Edmonton, has done a lot of research with the use of ketamine and treatment-resistant depression, and there's been some very positive results that are coming out. So ketamine for depression has been around for years. In fact, it's also funny to know. So I'm not a doctor.
Mhm.
My background is more in investment banking and finance and capital markets. But when I was doing my own research into this sector, I was actually comforted by the fact that there's some very credible research from um, reputable institutions, such as Yale University, the Imperial College of London, Johns Hopkins University, with research about psychedelics and mental health.
Mhm.
And if I were a betting man, I would say that it's only a matter of time before psychedelics is widely used for treating various mental health indications.
Mhm.
In fact, Alberta made news recently as being the first province in Canada to publicly announce that they were exploring the use of psychedelic compounds to use in mental health therapy. So it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that's very exciting. So that, now I was bringing that up for a reason, because of the fact that that you guys are using it, and my personal thoughts are, I think it's a fantastic way for number one, people get out of their own way and then heal these issues, and whether it's PTSD or depression or anxiety, there's all these alternative ways, and it's so nice to see that you're on the forefront of that, because I think it's a very powerful way to get really good results.
Absolutely. And the one thing that I will say for the Newly Institute, Warren, is that everything that we do in our treatment models and medical protocols has to be evidence-based
Hmm.
and medically backed. So while we do use psychedelics, there has to be substantive research behind that,
Sure.
or some other type of therapy. Yeah, so everything that we do is evidence-based.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. Well, now we know all about what the Newly is doing. This is fantastic. So let's get into a little bit about you, Arthur. So,
Sure.
so Arthur, so now you have to bear with me here. Okay, you have to listen closely. What got you from being a gosling? And I'm talking your beginnings. Where were you hatched? Where did you start your life,
Yeah.
leaving the
That,
nest, because you actually went out on your own at some point, right?
yeah.
To where you are today. Arthur Kwann, what is your backstory?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Warren. So I was born and raised in Calgary. My parents emigrated from Hong Kong back in the 1960s. And born and raised in Calgary, I wanted to see other parts of Canada, and so I ended up doing a bachelor in business administration degree in finance from Simon Fraser University. So I lived in Burnaby for several years in the 90s. Came back to Calgary, worked for a few years in the finance world, left again to do my MBA out and this time I went out east because I wanted to see both sides of Canada. So I did an MBA from Wilfrid Laurier University in Waterloo. So I lived in the Kitchener Waterloo area for a little while there in the early 2000s. came back to Calgary and then worked in the investment banking world for I think I was an investment banker for almost 18 years, right up to 2015, in oil and gas, obviously being in Calgary. And, but 2015 was a pretty rough year for junior oil and gas, which is the area that I predominantly participated in more. And so, 2015 was pretty tough. There were very little transactions, very little capital. And so at that time, I decided to go off on my own. And so, I had a short stint with an oil and gas company in business development, a short stint with an investment firm based out of New York, but being stationed in Calgary. But then my really big sort of, I guess going from a gosling
Mhm.
to a goose, I guess,
You're getting
was
it.
I decided to become an entrepreneur. And after a lot of research, the cannabis sector was just emerging at that time. This was, 2016, 2017, 2018. And so I started an investment fund focused on the cannabis sector called Canada Income Fund. And, started again with a business plan and grew it. I think at the peak, we had about $15 million in assets, ended up selling the management contract to another financial firm. And then along the way, myself and several other partners, we started a cannabis operating company. And the business plan there was we were buying cash flowing dispensaries in California, and that was the business plan. So so I was a co-founder and CEO of that company, and this was during the height of the cannabis sector, and thankfully we managed to sell that company to a Florida-based cannabis company. And then along the way, I was hearing a lot about the psychedelic sector, and that was during the height of COVID. So I was under lockdown, as was all of Canada. And to be honest with you, I really had nothing else better to do. So I spent my spare time reading articles on the psychedelic sector, doing my own research, talking to doctors, that sort of thing, and started putting pen to paper and started writing a business plan. And along the way, I met some of my co-founders at the Newly Institute, and so yeah, so here we are. So it's kind of a big change, if you will, because I started my career with TD Asset Management. So, one of the largest asset managers in Canada, very structured, very bureaucratic. And then I went over to Scotia Capital I think, 99, in their oil and gas investment banking group. And again, very structured, and then from there, I went on to smaller boutique-owned investment firms, to coming out on my own and doing these startup companies. And it's not for the faint of heart, I got to tell you, because we can probably do a Netflix series, I would say, on the Newly Institute, because it wasn't sunshine and roses. With any other startup, we had a lot of what I would say roller coaster rides, and a lot of issues. Trying to build out 3 clinics in the height of COVID was something that I probably would not take on again.
But interesting enough, though, where if you look back at it and you see how much work and the roller coaster ride and the ups and downs and the sleepless nights and all the things that go along with being an entrepreneur, right? But the truth is you did it, because it's existing, right? You did it, and would I do it again? I don't know, but now you're out, but here you are starting a 4th clinic. So right, so you look at the success. right? Even though all the hard work, but the hard work paid off.
Yeah, and there's no shortage. I mean, we're not out of the woods yet, but it's nice to see that we've progressed from being a business plan on paper to actually, having three operating clinics with, police officers, firefighters, veterans coming through the clinics and helping them. We've gotten a lot of our clients, if you will, they value discretion and confidentiality. But once in a while, we'll get a testimonial or a very nice email saying how we transformed their lives, or they're now able to go, get out of bed and go for walks or go back to work. And it's nice getting emails like that, or testimonials like that. But yeah, it's when I say it's not for the faint of heart, everything from human resource issues to construction issues to capital or funding issues. You name it, we probably went through it. But like you said, it's nice. Here we are. We're in the process of opening up our fourth clinic, and ideally, our aspiration is to be coast to coast across Canada. We like to have a footprint in every major city in Canada, and then we also have some strategic initiatives that we want to pursue, but just haven't yet, for resource or timing or funding issues. But there's so many, what I would say, more at risk populations that we would like to get in front of. For example, the Indigenous communities or First
Mhm.
Nations communities across Canada, the youth. We've had a couple inquiries, but right now we've been sort of treating people 18 and over.
Mhm.
Uh, but the under 18 segment is huge these days as well. And yeah, you name it. Well, depending on which stats, I think I read something from the Canadian Mental Health Foundation that 1 in 4 Canadians will be affected by some sort of mental health episode, either directly or indirectly through a relative. And it's sad, but it's very,
Yeah, because
you know,
one in
very
four.
topical. Yeah,
1 in 4. Isn't that crazy? So,
it is.
so here I got a couple of questions for you. Number one, looking back on your own life, right, as just a kid growing up, whether you're going to school or getting into high school, did you ever see yourself doing what you're doing now?
No, to be honest, I didn't know what I wanted to do in high school. Like a lot of other Asian families, I was sort of being nudged towards becoming a doctor or something in the medical field. And I tried that. So right out of high school, I actually enrolled into the biochemistry program at the University of Calgary. And I did that, I think, for about 2 years. And I got to be honest with you, Warren, I'm squeamish around blood. And so that probably doesn't help me being a doctor. So any bodily fluids, I'm squeamish. So that was the end of that. And I took some time off. And before I went back to university, this time at Simon Fraser, in the finance world, because I knew that I like I like I like numbers, and I like to eat. So if I did a degree in, say, mathematics or something, or anything, I probably wouldn't, it'd be hard to have a career unless you go into teaching or research in mathematics.
Mm.
So I looked around and said, what could I make a career of? And, it has to do with numbers. So it was either accounting or finance. So I chose finance.
Mm.
And so, here we are. But, going back to your question, Warren, I had no idea that I would, you know, I would be doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And so,
What did your dad do?
yeah, so my dad, it's kind of funny, I mentioned that they came over in the 60s, and so uh, uh, my dad started off as a short order cook and did that for years, and then he got his real estate license and he became a realtor
Hmm.
for a little while there. So we were sort of, I grew up, I would say, a sort of lower to middle class. And I was the first to go to post-secondary. And the one thing that was always instilled in us is that, education, and that's in my mind, that's the key to breaking that poverty cycle.
Hmm.
And so, I have two sisters and a brother, and we all have post-secondary degrees. In fact, I think we all have graduate degrees here. My sister is a social worker, my brother's a banker, my other sister is a teacher, and so yeah, so that was the key. But my dad, when came to Canada, was a short order cook. My mom, she retired as a hairdresser several years ago, but before that, she was a maid in a hotel chain here in Calgary as well. So,
Hmm. That's
yeah,
interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it was it was a little tough growing up, but again, it was that hammering of getting your education and getting a good job to I think that was instilled in us at an early age. So
Yeah. Obviously, that's sort of that hard work.
yeah, and I'm a big believer in lifelong learning, and that's part of the reason why I got acquainted with Wilfred, our team leader at the executive committee. I'm a big fan of continuous learning. So learning, having you come in and give us talks and how we can, how we can improve ourselves and lead better and that sort of thing is a big it's something I really value. And in fact, I'm enrolled in the Certificate of Management Excellence program at Harvard Business School.
Oh, wow.
Uh, yeah, and I was in Boston in September. I was in Boston in June, and I'll head back there in December. But again, it's one of those things I don't think I'll ever stop learning. Even after I got my MBA, I have my ICD.D designation from the Institute of Corporate Directors. So it's a joint program with the Institute and the Rotman School of Business in Toronto. And, I also have my CFA Chartered Financial Analyst designation from the CFA Institute. So,
You're a
yeah.
smart guy.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
Easy,
Or
easy.
I
No. You
I
can't
just
discount
like to
that. I won't
learn.
let you.
Yeah. But
So,
the one thing I truly value, and I think you're gonna get into this, is the whole team approach. Um, certainly at Harvard, we learned that there are different types of leaders, and I think my leadership style has always been very uh, democratic and sort of that consensus leadership. And that's, I think that's how the newly became what it is today. Is my partners at the clinics, in amongst the management ranks, it was a lot of uh, pulling different pieces together from different functions to create what is the newly. So it's just that That I think you refer it as a V formation.
It's the V
Uh,
formation, and we're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
yeah,
So I got a question for you before we jump into that piece, because that's
sure.
coming up next. But um, Arthur, what's the greatest thing that's happened to you that ruffled your feathers? Now that can be a really positive experience, or it can be a really negative experience. What would the number one thing that comes to your mind that ruffled your feathers, and how did you respond to it?
Yeah. So, in between my investment banking career, my friend and old business partner, we tried to start a private equity firm. And this was back in the late 2000s, 2008, 2009. And it when it ruffled my feathers in the sense that it was a good experience and not so good experience in the sense that we learned lots about business and but at the opposite end, it didn't get off the ground. It was just really tough treading. There was that whole financial market crisis in 2008 that really stymied our fundraising efforts. And after 2 years of, 2 years of fighting an uphill battle, we decided to call it a day. And I went back into investment banking, and my business partner went back into his accounting roles, and that really taught me a lot. I think I heard somewhere that you learn more from your failures than your successes, and it's really true. So now when I start a new venture, um, you know, you got to do your research. You got to talk to people. You got to get out there and know, who your customers are, know your market, the funding that you need. So when I started the cannabis fund, for example, I knew very little from I knew very little about cannabis. I grew up in a pretty strict household, so I would have, I would have had my head chopped off if I tried cannabis. So that whole world was new to me, Warren. But I saw an opportunity there. But before I jumped in, I did a ton of research. I read every article, every paper, I could get my hands on the emerging cannabis sector in Canada. I talked to people that were already in the industry. I talked to people that were around the industry. So if there's one thing that I learned from that is you always got to do your research and understand what you're getting yourself into and coming into a new venture, eyes wide open. As an entrepreneur, I'm sure, there's a lot of entrepreneurs out there, you have stars in your eyes and you think you're going to create the next Facebook or Tesla or something like that. But
True.
for every Facebook or Tesla, there's thousands of other startups that don't make it. So you have to be prepared for that.
I've yet to find an entrepreneur, so someone like yourself, and your story is the same. I hear it all the time, and I've experienced it myself. And I've come to terms with is there's nothing wrong with failing forward,
Mhm.
right?
Absolutely. I think you learn the most when you fail, and especially people that are reflective. Um, I always think back. What could I have done better, or what I would do differently, and apply it for future ventures, if you
Sure.
will.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Great learning opportunities. So,
absolutely.
so here it goes. Here it goes into the team piece here. There, Arthur, is that and as you very well know, because we did talk about this, is that geese fly 71% further and faster when flying in the V formation than when flying alone. So it's much more efficient. What do you think the secret is to getting a team flying in that V formation?
Yeah, I think the secret, at least based on my personal
Mhm.
experience, is finding the right partners. that believe in the same vision, or believe in your vision, and believe in the same goal. Because if you and take your time getting to know your partners and getting to know the person, because it's very hard. And I learned this from personal experience, from bringing in the wrong partner and trying to get that partner out, than bringing in the right partner to begin with. And
Mm.
so you know, and I think that's the secret, especially at the newly here. Like I said, I'm not a doctor. Like, psychotherapy, psychedelic assisted therapy, what do I know? So, but so everybody brought a different skill set. I brought in the business skill set of, getting the funding, handling all the business side of the company, and relying or trusting my partners, the doctors, to put together the medical protocols and to set up the clinics. And I got to tell you, Warren, some of the clinicians that we have in the clinics, like, we have the A team at the clinics. And I'm not just saying that the newly, I've got to know some of the clinicians quite well,
Mhm.
and they truly believe in what they do, and in helping, people get better, and and bettering the pond, if you will. And I'm very thankful and grateful for the clinicians that we have at the clinics today. They're a great team.
Mm. So what I heard from you from that is sort of the secret is number one, having the right people is the number one thing. Then, but also believing in the same vision or believing in the same goal, so that we all know where we're going. We know why we're going there. If I may paraphrase you, right? And then having the skill set in order to accomplish what needs to get done. Is that what I'm hearing from you?
Exactly. You mentioned that geese fly faster and further when flying in the V formation, and that's true. But there's got to be a destination to that V formation. We have one goose flying this way or another flying that way. You're no better, and so that's why I really believe in bringing in the right partner, so that everyone's flying in the same direction and forming that V formation. So
Excellent. Perfect. So I know we kind of led into this, but I'd like to, dive into a little bit deeper into, what are you doing to better the pond? Like, what ripples are you creating out there in the world with the newly?
yeah, I think little by little, we're creating ripples in the fact that we're helping the people that help us. And don't get me wrong, we do see the general population, but we have a focus on first responders and veterans. And as we talked about earlier, I can't even fathom some of the trauma that these people have seen or have experienced firsthand. And it's hard. We deal with people in the return to work world. We deal with people that are sort of classified as TPI 3, so very complex cases, severe cases, if you
Mm,
will.
okay.
They tried other treatment programs, it didn't seem to work. They tried other therapies, and then they come to us. And so we see, a lot of complicated and severe cases, if you will. And so, what ripples, it's individual by individual, and we're trying to um, better that person, so that one, he or she can have a better life in general, and have the confidence to go back into the workforce, or at least go outside of their home, and be able to enjoy life, as a lot of us take granted for. And so, uh, you know the one thing that's a big, I would say, issue for us is hiring healthcare professionals. Like I'm sure for with any other sector, there's a shortage of healthcare professionals. And so if you follow us on social media, you'll see that almost every second week we're hiring. And but the clinicians that we have at the clinic, we're almost at capacity at our clinics, and it's nice that we have a graduation ceremony for each cohort, and it's nice to see people that have come into our clinic, and we evaluate them, and then we look at the same person graduating from the clinic, and it's in some cases it's like night and day.
Mm.
And that's we're hoping to keep creating those ripples, sort of one client at a time.
There's a couple things on that, Arthur, I'd like to touch on that are important. I think one is when you said that you have clients who, they tried other therapies or other programs, they've tried other things and they didn't work. So they come to the Newly. Why do they come to the Newly?
Yeah, and so I think it's we've been slowly getting the word out there about our programs and our medical protocols, and of course we track all that data, and our the data suggests that we trend pretty well, well above the industry average. So depending on what mental health indication, we've had over an 80% positive response rate to our treatment protocol, which is phenomenal.
Yeah, that's
And
phenomenal.
yeah, and so how do we get the word out, one? And so we have a marketing strategy where it's sort of we tackle them from all sides, so top down, bottom up, and in the middle. And so we'll I guess have social media ads geared towards first responders directly, and so that's the bottom up approach. We also have a big business development team that will approach the stakeholders directly, like the Correctional Service of Canada or the Workers' Compensation Board of Alberta, and so that's the top-down approach. And then we also have a middle approach where we try to at various addiction or pain conferences or mental health conferences, we try to reach out to caseworkers, for example, or case managers directly, and just to tell them a little bit about the Newly. We have an active referral program as well, where we'll reach out to family physicians, sleep doctors, mood doctors, that sort of thing, and just try to get the word out of the Newly Institute.
Cool. So, and the next question that I have for you, and it goes sort of on this ripple effect, as we know, when we throw a pebble in the pond and then the ripples go out and they keep on, we don't know how far they'll go out. They keep on going. But I think about someone who's like a client of yours who's had PTSD, they've had trauma of some sort. So now whether that goes into a mental health issue, whether it goes into addiction outlets, however they're trying to self-medicate, but that one person who is in that circumstance, if that affects everyone else around them, right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's a spouse or kids or family or like it, the effect, the ripple effect that goes out. So I just sort of look at this, and I was just sort of, as you were talking, I was contemplating of, by you affecting one person, so one police officer or one firefighter or one paramedic, that you're affecting that whole world around that individual as well.
Yeah, absolutely, Warren. I think you hit the nail on the head. It's so much more than the client, because if you're suffering from addiction issues or mental health, other mental health issues, it affects your family, your kids, your spouse, your friends, your coworkers. And so if we better that person, the hope is, Warren, that their family life will get better, their friends will see that, and their coworkers will see that. And in general, it benefits society as a whole as well. If that person is able to return to work, then we've just added another, contributing member of society back into the workforce. And that's, and so if you think about the ripple effect in the ponds, the concentric circles just get bigger and bigger. And so, it starts with the family unit, the spouse, the kids, the friends, the coworkers, the society in general.
And so, so now when we started our conversation today, you can see how important this conversation is, because look at the impacts, right? When you better the pond, look at, right? It's not one person, right? It is
No.
whole. So
Yeah.
thank you, from the sincerely.
Yeah, no, thank you, Warren, for having me here. It's been a great experience, and if you're ever in Calgary, drop me a line. I'd love to give you a tour of our clinic. I think you'll be pretty impressed. It's our flagship clinic. It's 13,000 square feet just south of downtown, in a professional building. In fact, I think we're the largest tenant in that building now, and it's kind of sad, but to say, but also, good. We've had to expand the clinical footprint over the last couple of years. Last year we just took up another floor on the fifth floor. Just, there's just so much, unfortunately, that, there's a big need for our services.
Yeah, there's a that's kind of a dichotomy there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I got another couple of questions for you here, Arthur, before we wrap up today. Being that you said you also went on your entrepreneurial journey, what's the one lesson that you've learned along your path that you would share with an entrepreneur starting a business today?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do better than that, Warren. I'll give you a few. These are personal lessons that I've gone through. So one, just do your research, know what you're getting into. I mean, as we talked about, when people think of startups, everyone has stars in their eyes and think they're going to be the next, Facebook or something. But really do your research and understand who your competitors are, your target market, the capital that's required to start the business. And as an entrepreneur, be prepared to wear multiple hats. I think the one thing that I would stress, Warren, is you can't come in having an ego into it. You have to be prepared to be, at least at the beginning, the cook, the chef, and the dishwasher, because as an entrepreneur, you're doing everything.
Mm,
And the second thing is, as we talked about, find the right partners. If you need a partner, take your time in getting to know your partner, and see what drives and what motivates them. And the third lesson I would say is, when you go through your business plan and the financial forecast, whatever you budget, and I know it's a common thing, but I would say double that number, because
mm,
there's always unexpected expenses and costs that you don't even think about or know that come at you, and all of a sudden, so whatever you budgeted for, I would say allocate, at least double that, and you should have enough cushion to weather any unexpected costs or expenses or storms that come your way. And believe me, there will be, like with any plans. What's that saying? Nothing goes according to plan. And so you always have to be prepared for whatever comes at you.
yeah, absolutely. My line is, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans.
Yeah, that's right.
So I have one last question for you, Arthur. So if you were standing on the top of a mountain and the whole world was intently listening to you, what would you say?
Yeah, I and this is a bit altruistic, but I would say, live for yourself and do things that you like to do, not because of what your parents may want you to do or your spouse, because the one thing that motivates people is doing things that interest them. And so you got to love what you're doing. You have to live for yourself, and you know yourself better than anyone else. And so yes, we all have families, we all have parents, and they're important, but at the same time, you have to take care of yourself first. And that's part of the ripple effect, because as soon as you're able to take care of yourself, you're better able to take care of your kids, your spouse, your family, your extended family, your friends, your coworkers. If you're in a better frame of mind, and in a good mental health state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, excellent. So it really comes down to take care of yourself first, right? If
Absolutely.
put on your own oxygen mask on first before putting on someone else's.
That's right.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Arthur, I really truly want to thank you, number one, for everything you're doing. I think you are creating some really incredible ripples in the pond by helping people that are that are helping us, I guess we should say, and you're really making an incredible impact with the work that you're doing at the Newly Institute. If people want to go find you, have conversations with you, or learn more about the Newly, where do they go?
Yeah. So first and foremost, our website is thenewly.ca, and we're active on social media. So we're on Twitter, or X, it's called now, I think. We're on Facebook, we're on LinkedIn, we're on Instagram. So come check us out. If you Google the Newly Institute, you'll see that we have a toll-free number that you can dial for more information about our programs and our services. And yeah, and if any of the listeners out there are in Calgary, do drop us a line. And we host tours almost on a weekly basis, either before the clinic opens or after the clinic closes. And we love to have you come take a look, and we'd love to meet you.
Perfect. And if somebody wants to get a hold of you, Arthur, where's the best way to find you?
Yeah. So the best way to reach me is probably by email. And so my email is arthur@thenewly.ca.
Okay, I'll get that in the show notes too. So
Yeah, yeah. And I try to respond to all my emails. It may take me a few days, but I do get around to everyone here. So
I'm sure you get inundated. So perfect. And I do have clients in Calgary. So next time I am in town, I will guarantee I'll look you up, and we can see the clinic and have a conversation in person. So
that'd be great. Yeah,
fantastic.
thank you so much for having me, Warren. This was a lot of fun,
Yeah.
and I can now say I've been on a podcast before.
You can now say you can now officially say that you are I'm a podcaster. You can say
Yeah, that's right.
so. There you have it, folks. It was a great time today with Arthur Kwann of the Newly Institute, and this is Warren Barry, and I'm flocking off to take you beyond the pond to better the pond, because we're better together. Thank you so much, Arthur.
Thank you.